How's it going, everyone? Taki here. We have an exciting handheld to look at today in the new GPi Case 2 from RetroFlag. In this video, we're going to take a look at the GPi Case 2 and the GPi Case 2 Deluxe Edition. In the interest of full transparency, RetroFlag sent over both of these cases to me for the purposes of this review. All the opinions that you're about to hear are my own, and no one from RetroFlag has seen or approved this video before it was uploaded for all of you. So we have two GPi cases that we're going to take a look at in this video, along with two different CM4 models. To test out the dock, we're also going to pair this combo up with an external controller. The main difference between these two products is their price and the inclusion of the dock that supports HDMI output. This retails for $90 and the case without the dock goes for $80. CM4 prices can vary depending on where you live, but if we go by the MSRP of the lowest configuration, this would bring our total investment for a Pi 4 handheld to $105 or $115 with the dock included. Here is the box of the cheaper model. We can see the GPi Case 2 on the side, and on the other side, we can see that this includes a 480p screen, a headphone jack, and a 4000 mAh battery. The back of the box has a diagram of the device with an upgrade port, contrast slider, 5-volt USB cable, headphone jack, volume slider, sleep button, and power on and off switch. Now let's do a quick unboxing. Here I have both versions of the GPi case. The original device used these game carts with Pis inside. This device used a Raspberry Pi Zero, but we have seen many mods to get this to support more powerful hardware, like the CM3 version that I made a video about some time ago. There are some meaningful differences between these two products. We have two additional buttons on the front that we'll go over later. On the back, you'll notice that we no longer have to deal with batteries. This was the most annoying part of the original case. Now we have a 4000 mAh rechargeable battery built into the device, which makes this a much better product in my opinion. Here's a closer look at the front of the GPi Case 2. You can see we have a 3-inch IPS display. This is not an OCA panel, so it is possible to get dust under the front plastic cover. I'll talk more about what you will need to do to clean that later in this video because these devices are fairly DIY friendly. We have a D-pad on the left side and 4 ABXY buttons on the right with screen printing on the front shell. We also have a new turbo button and a RetroFlag button that I like to use as my menu hotkey. We also have start and select buttons with a huge mono speaker in the right corner. On the right side of the device, you have a volume slider wheel that works throughout the system. I'll have an audio test of this mono speaker later in this video. On the bottom, we have our new Type-C charging port and our headphone jack. On the left side, we have a brightness slider labeled as contrast. This has a decent maximum brightness and a low enough setting to use at night. Another new addition to this product is a sleep button. A single press of this will put the device into a low power mode and turn off the screen. We can wake the device up by pressing it again. Besides this, we have an on and off button. When this is engaged, you will not be able to remove the cartridge cover. The back has our updated branding and shoulder buttons. Now that we have more power, it would have been nice to have two additional buttons back here to support more systems that need extra buttons. I just want to mention here that the shell on the Case 2 is very robust and premium. It is the same material from the original device that I've owned for the last 2 years, and this guy has held up very well, even after taking a beating. Another new change this time around is that we no longer have the cartridge mechanism that I really enjoyed in the original product. Now we have a simple cover that hides your CM4. One of the changes that we have here are holes on the top and on the sides to aid in heat dissipation. If I take the cover off, we can see that there's a USB port on the top to update board firmware. Also here you can see our SD card tray and a slot for our board. I have a new CM4 on hand, and I'm going to show you two different ways to install this in the GPi Case 2. Here we have my CM4. This one doesn't have Wi-Fi or eMMC because it's one of the cheaper models. I wouldn't recommend getting a CM4 without Wi-Fi unless you already own a Pi 4 or you have a lot of experience working with Pis. You can see that there's an outline of this board inside the shell to show you how it should be installed. You could put this inside like this and line it up with the screw holes. Then you just need to press down on both sides to install it, but I actually don't like to use it this way. You can also install your SD while you're here, but there are some important considerations to be aware of before you do. I find it easier to just remove the back shell and do both of these together because it gives you a chance of getting familiar with the device and or cleaning the screen if you have some dust inside. We'll talk more about this near the end of this video, but we also have enough space here to install a heatsink if we want. This device has already been configured, and you can see that I have attached a Wi-Fi cable to the CM4. It's much easier to use a CM4 with Wi-Fi than without in this product. Because I already need to take this apart to show the inside, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to seat the CM4 properly. As I said, this is very DIY friendly. There are only 5 screws that you need to remove, and you can open the sides of the case with a simple guitar pick. Now that I have the back shell off, I can see that I was able to correctly install the CM4 without opening the shell. I am going to remove the CM4 now so I can do it again. With the shell open, you can easily line up the CM4 on the mounting holes and clip it into place with even pressure on the top and bottom. Before we go any further, I want to get my SD card ready for this device. We're going to use RetroPie on both devices, so the first thing that we need to do is head over to the download page and grab the image. Then we need to flash this to the SD card. Before we can see any video signal on the device itself, we need to head over to the GPi Case 2 GitHub page and download their patch. After we have it downloaded, we need to put this on our SD card and apply the patch. Then we are good to go. Now that we have our SD card ready, I want to talk about the SD card tray. From testing this for the last week, I've learned some tips that I would like to share with potential buyers of this kit. When the device is open like this, you just need to put your SD card into place and then apply some pressure to the bottom to slide it into place. The problem is that you can't press this tip when the shell is installed. On your first install of this card, you probably won't have any issues at all, but the points on the side of the lid can pop out of place after opening and closing this slot several times. You can avoid this issue by using something like a guitar pick or a screwdriver to apply force to the tip of the SD card while you slide the lid into its locked position. This wouldn't be a problem at all if you could use your index finger directly, but the back shell is blocking your access to this point. The next thing that I want to focus on is the battery. This is a fairly massive upgrade to this device in terms of usability. We have a 4000 mAh pack here with charging speeds that can reach up to 10 watts. The battery has a diode on the top, which I assume is just a temperature sensor. The battery is resting on foam pads and it should not be able to move around when the device is closed. If you ever want to clean your screen in the future, you will need to pry off this pad from the board to access 2 screws. This process is much easier on the old model, so I wouldn't attempt this on your own unless you're very comfortable working around this. In my case, I want to make sure that the inside of my screen is pristine since I'm already halfway there. Before moving on, I also want to look at the inside of the dock. This is a simple PCB that does video out, charging, and provides 2 USB 2.0 ports. I tried another Type-C dock that I own to see if I could get video out, and I wasn't able to. I don't know if we will see some open source solutions for this down the line, which is why I think the dock version of this is the better deal. While it is sad to only have a mono speaker on this device, the one that we do have is decent audio levels. Here are some sound recording samples. Now let's talk about the screen. For this, I have a comparison between the original screen and the new one. I don't know if this will come across well after YouTube smacks this video with compression, but the original screen has a yellow tint to it compared to the new one. It also lacks the clarity that we can see on the new screen. There is one issue that I noticed while doing my testing, and it is that the new panel seems to have a slower display response time. I don't have the tools to measure this accurately, and I also don't know if this was caused by some setting that is automatically applied in the RetroPie image that I'm using. This is not going to look the same in every game that you play, but I did find it to be noticeable when I was playing 2D games with static backgrounds. I have a bunch of game tests later in this video with the screen filmed directly so you can see what it looks like in different settings. Hopefully this is just a matter of some setting being wrong on the Pi adapter board or inside the firmware. Either way, the new screen looks better than the old one. Here's what my RetroPie image looks like after I've fully configured everything. I finished the installation process of the safe shutdown script and installed additional emulators with my Wi-Fi enabled CM4, and then I made a backup to use in my CM4 Lite. You can do something similar to this if you have a regular Pi 4 lying around. Recently, I started testing audio lag on these systems, and this device has a very low latency of only 66 milliseconds. The next thing that I want to look at is the gaming performance of this device. The Pi 4's ability is well known at this point, so I want to focus on how usable this hardware is with our limited control set. Even though you can play retro games without issues, I want to focus on things that did not run well on the original GPi case because I think that's where you'll find the most value in this upgrade. The first system that I want to look at is Nintendo 64. If you buy this device without the dock and you do not have a CM4 with Bluetooth, you're going to need to be creative with our limited set of buttons. I've remapped the analog stick to the D-pad, as well as a few other buttons that need custom remapping depending on the game that I'm playing. This isn't a perfect solution, but it does work well depending on the game that you're playing. If you have the dock or a CM4 with Bluetooth, you can use this with an external controller with no issues. It just would have been cool to see at least one analog stick in this revision. Dreamcast is in a similar situation to N64 due to our lack of an analog stick, but there are a lot more games that do not need analog input to play well. While filming the previous footage, I wanted to see how easy it was to play Street Fighter 3 on this. I would not typically play this kind of a game on a device like this, but I had a good experience on the Mii Mini that I recently reviewed, so I wanted to see how this compared. I don't think the D-pad is really suitable for something like this, but I do think that I could probably get better at using it after more practice. PSP is another system that runs well on this device, and I didn't have any significant issues remapping the analog stick to the D-pad in games that needed it. A system like PSP benefits from a 16:9 display, which is why I would primarily play these games with the dock on the GPi Case 2.
Too many of these precursor orbs. A health pack.
Now that I've had more time to test this device, I wanted to take a look at adding a heatsink to my CM4. I would say that even if you do not have a heatsink installed, the heat from the CM4 is not that significant due to how far away the processor is from your fingers. The only time I think that you will feel any heat is if you play this device while having it connected to a charger. You'll feel a little warmth from the battery. Most of the heat from this processor is radiating out through the screen and out from the top where your fingers won't be. I mentioned earlier that there is enough space here for a heatsink if you want one, but there are some things to consider. Right now, I have an 11mm heatsink installed inside my device, and it fits without any problems, but the lid cannot close over this without some modification. I don't want to do that, so I'm still deciding if I want to keep this open or use a smaller heatsink. I will mention that the GPi case does not come with screws for the CM4, so you'll have to source your own. On my second device, I've gone with a smaller heatsink that doesn't obstruct the lid. I don't have screws yet for this case, so I'm keeping this in place with some folded pads. This seems to be a better mix between the two heatsinks, but the easier solution would be to just use some cheap mini heatsinks. These can stick directly to a surface without any need for screws, and they don't obstruct the case from closing. In terms of thermals with the bigger heatsink, things are pretty good. The front of the device is around 35 Celsius on the screen, with the backlight at around 39 Celsius. The area around the heatsink is around 40 Celsius, with the hottest point on the heatsink going to around 48. Under this point where your fingers will be, the temperature drops to around 36 Celsius, which is why I said this heat isn't an issue due to where it's placed. That leaves us with the dock itself, and this has some interesting things to point out. The first thing that I found was that the controls didn't work when I was trying to use them. I found that I could fix this issue by removing the device and holding down a button while reconnecting it. I will also mention that you cannot hot swap the video signal. You need to reboot the device completely to switch video modes, and the video mode is determined by whether or not the device is connected to the dock. This isn't a big deal, but it is worth mentioning. The second thing is that the video output is set to 720p. I don't know why this was chosen, but it doesn't really bother me at all, and I'm glad to see that the video signal is not a stretched 4:3 image. It seems that it is a native 16:9 image. The two extra USB 2.0 ports are a welcome addition to this device because it allows me to connect a controller directly and have a remaining port available for things like an external hard drive. I can also play games that are difficult to play on the device itself due to the limited control set. Anyway, that's going to wrap up my review of the GPi Case 2. I think this is a decent value for the hardware that you're getting. Your total investment for this device with all things included is a good value compared to other handhelds in the market at this price point. If the Pi Foundation keeps this CM4 layout going forward, it will also mean that you can easily upgrade this in the future to something with more power like you currently can with the Raspberry Pi 02. If you want to buy one of these, there are links down below. If you have any questions about something that I didn't go over, you can leave them down below and I'll try to get back to you. Please consider subscribing to the channel to support my work and feel free to take a look at one of the other videos on screen now. Happy gaming everyone. Taki out.